Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something about life that I've learned the hard way. Every single year gives you a chance to start again, but not everybody takes it. Some people carry the same pain, the same excuses, the same fear from one year into the next, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But 2026, listen to me carefully, 2026 can be the year you rebuild yourself from the ground up. Not fix a little here and there. Not patch up what's broken. I'm talking about becoming a new you, a stronger you, a disciplined you, a focused you. Because you don't get a different life by hoping. You get a different life by changing your habits. You see, success is not an event. It's not one big lucky break. Success is built on what you do every day when nobody is watching. It's built on habits. And if your habits are broken, your life will feel broken. But here's the good news, you can rebuild both. You can decide that the person you were is not the person you're going to stay. I don't care how many mistakes you made. I don't care how many times you failed. I don't care how lost you feel right now. If you're still breathing, God ain't done with you yet. That means you still got time to rebuild. The first thing you got to understand is this: you can't rebuild your life with the same mindset that damaged it. Some of y'all trying to change your results without changing your thinking. That don't work. You got to start telling yourself a new story about who you are. Stop saying, I'm unlucky. Stop saying, I always mess up. Stop saying, this is just how I am. No, it ain't. That's who you practiced being. And anything you practiced, you can unlearn and relearn. You rebuild yourself by choosing new habits that support the future you want. Another thing that keeps people stuck is waiting for motivation. Let me tell you something, motivation is unreliable. Some days you feel like it, some days you don't. But habits don't care about feelings. Habits run on decision and repetition. You brush your teeth whether you feel motivated or not. You go to work whether you feel motivated or not. That's the same way you got to treat your growth. If you only improve when you feel inspired, you'll improve once in a while. But if you build habits, you'll improve every day. Now, rebuilding yourself also means letting go of what don't fit the new you. Some of y'all trying to carry old environments, old friends, old attitudes into a new season. That's like trying to build a new house on a cracked foundation. It won't hold. Growth requires separation. Not because you're better than anybody, but because you're serious about your future. Everybody can't go where you're going. Everybody can't think how you need to think. Everybody can't support what you're trying to become. And that's okay. Rebuilding sometimes feels lonely before it feels powerful. Let me tell you something else. Rebuilding is not pretty. It's uncomfortable. It's frustrating. It's slow. You're going to have days where you slip back into old habits. Days where you doubt yourself. Days where you're tired. But the difference between people who rebuild and people who stay stuck is simple. They keep going anyway. They don't wait to feel ready. They act while they're scared. They act while they're unsure. They act while they're still healing. Because action creates clarity. Action creates confidence. Action creates change. You also got to learn to trust the process. See, we live in a world that wants fast results. But real transformation takes time. You didn't become who you are overnight, and you won't become who you're meant to be overnight either. But every day you practice better habits, you're laying bricks. 1 brick don't look like much. 10 bricks don't look like much. But stack them long enough, you got a wall. Keep stacking, you got a house. Keep stacking, you got a life rebuilt stronger than before. Another truth is this: rebuilding yourself requires honesty. You got to face what you avoid. Face your discipline. Face your excuses. Face your distractions. Face your comfort zone. Because what you ignore controls you. But what you confront, you can change. You can't rebuild around denial. You rebuild around truth. And the truth is, most of us know exactly what habits are holding us back. We just don't want to give them up because they're comfortable. But comfort don't create growth. Pressure does. Effort does. Consistency does. And listen to me carefully on this. Your past does not disqualify your future. Some of you feel like you're too far gone. Too many mistakes. Too much time wasted. Too many chances missed. But rebuilding is not about erasing the past. It's about using it. Your failures become lessons. Your pain becomes strength. Your setbacks become direction. When you rebuild right, nothing you went through is wasted. It becomes part of the foundation. You also got to rebuild your relationship with yourself. A lot of people talk to themselves worse than anybody else ever has. I'm not good enough. I'll never change. I always fail. If you spoke to a friend like that, you wouldn't have that friend long. So why are you talking to yourself like that? You become what you repeatedly tell yourself. So in 2026, you got to start speaking like the person you're becoming, not the person you're leaving behind. Identity shapes behavior. When you see yourself differently, you act differently. Let me tell you something powerful. Small habits change identity. When you wake up early consistently, you start seeing yourself as disciplined. When you exercise regularly, you start seeing yourself as strong. When you keep promises to yourself, you start seeing yourself as reliable. And once identity shifts, everything shifts. Because you don't act out of force anymore, you act out of who you believe you are. That's the real rebuild. Not just doing different things, but becoming a different person. And understand this, rebuilding yourself is an act of self-respect. It's you saying, I deserve better from me, not from the world, not from luck, not from other people, from you. That's power. Because the moment you take responsibility for your habits, you take back control of your life. You stop waiting. You stop blaming. You start building. And builders don't complain about the ground. They lay the bricks anyway. So if 2025 knocked you down, good. Because sometimes you got to fall apart to see what needs rebuilding. Sometimes you got to lose who you were to become who you meant to be. Don't be ashamed of starting again. Starting again is courage. Starting again is wisdom. Starting again is growth. Every strong person you admire rebuilt themselves at least once, sometimes many times. Now hear me on this. 2026 ain't going to change you automatically. January 1st don't have magic in it. A new calendar don't create a new character. The only way this year becomes different is if you become different. Different habits, different discipline, different focus, different standards. That's the rebuild. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need permission. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need approval. You decide, you commit, you act. And I want you to imagine something. Imagine the version of you at the end of this year who kept the right habits, the one who stayed consistent, the one who didn't quit, the one who rebuilt patiently. That version of you is stronger, calmer, clearer, more confident. And that version is not fantasy. It's the result of daily choices starting now, not tomorrow, not next week, now. So stand up in your mind today and declare something. I am rebuilding myself in 2026, not wishing, not hoping, brick by brick, habit by habit, decision by decision, day by day. And when you do that long enough, you won't recognize the person you used to be. And that is one of the greatest victories a human being can experience. Ladies and gentlemen, you are not finished. You are under construction. And if you commit to the right habits, this can be the year you meet the strongest version of yourself you've ever known. Rebuilding your life always begins with what you do repeatedly, not what you feel occasionally. A lot of people wait for motivation like it's some magical signal that tells them when it's time to change. They say, I'll start when I feel ready, or I just need the right mood. But the truth is, readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision followed by action. The most powerful changes in your life will never come from bursts of inspiration. They come from patterns, from routines, from habits you practice until they become automatic. That's why rebuilding yourself is not about hype, excitement, or temporary energy. It's about structure. It's about choosing behaviors that move you forward and repeating them until they become part of who you are. Think about it like this. Every day you already live by habits, whether you notice them or not. The time you wake up, the way you use your phone, how you respond to stress, what you eat, how you spend your free time, these are not random. They're conditioned patterns. And those patterns are quietly building your future. If the habits are weak, the future feels stuck. If the habits are strong, the future expands. That means the direction of your life is not controlled by big dramatic decisions once in a while, but by small repeated actions every day. That realization is powerful because it puts change within reach. You don't need a new personality overnight. You need new daily behaviors practiced consistently. One of the biggest misunderstandings about change is believing you must feel different before you act different. But psychology and real life experience show the opposite is true. Action changes feeling. When you act disciplined, you start to feel disciplined. When you keep promises to yourself, you start to trust yourself. When you follow through, even when it's inconvenient, you begin to see yourself as reliable and strong. That identity shift comes from behavior repetition, not emotional readiness. So waiting for motivation is backwards. Motivation often shows up after you start, not before. Once you see yourself taking action, your brain begins to align with that new reality. Confidence grows because evidence grows. Habits also remove the constant mental negotiation that drains people. When something is a habit, you don't debate it every day. You don't wake up arguing with yourself about whether to do it. It's already decided. That's freedom. People think discipline is restrictive, but in reality, it's liberating. It reduces decision fatigue. It removes uncertainty. It creates stability. And stability is exactly what rebuilding requires. If every day depends on how you feel, progress will be inconsistent. But if your key actions are habitual, progress becomes steady regardless of mood, stress, or circumstances. Another crucial aspect is that habits compound. One small improvement repeated daily creates results far larger than occasional intense effort. A person who improves 1% a day through consistent behavior will transform dramatically over time, while someone who makes huge effort once in a while but lacks routine often stays in the same place. This is why rebuilding feels slow at first. The early stages of habit change don't look impressive. There's no dramatic visible shift. But beneath the surface, repetition is rewiring behavior pathways. Over weeks and months, that quiet repetition becomes momentum. And once momentum forms, change accelerates. Habits also rebuild self-respect. Many people lose confidence not because they lack ability, but because they repeatedly break promises to themselves. Each time you say you'll do something and don't, your brain records inconsistency. Over time, you stop trusting your own intentions. But when you start honoring small commitments daily, trust returns. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. That internal trust is the foundation of self-belief. Without it, goals feel unrealistic. With it, growth feels natural. So rebuilding through habits is not only behavioral, it's psychological restoration. There is also power in the predictability of habits during difficult periods. Life will always include stress, setbacks, and uncertainty. Motivation disappears quickly under pressure, but habits endure because they require less emotional energy once established. That means during hard times, your routines can carry you when willpower is low. They become anchors that keep you moving forward, even when everything else feels unstable. That resilience is why habit-based change lasts longer than motivation-based change. Motivation fluctuates with mood and circumstance. Habits persist across both. Ultimately, rebuilding through daily behavior is about shifting from intention to embodiment. Instead of wishing to be disciplined, you practice disciplined actions. Instead of hoping to be focused, you repeat focused behaviors. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you want to be closes. Not through sudden transformation, but through accumulated evidence. Each repetition is a vote for the person you're becoming. And when enough votes are cast, identity changes. That's when rebuilding becomes real, when your habits no longer feel like effort, but like expression of who you have become. Your mindset and self-identity are the hidden forces behind every action you take. Most people focus on what they're doing wrong, but they rarely examine how they see themselves. The truth is, you don't consistently act against who you believe you are. If deep down you see yourself as lazy, you'll always find a reason to delay. If you see yourself as unlucky, you'll interpret every setback as proof that life is against you. If you see yourself as someone who never finishes, you'll unconsciously repeat that pattern. Behavior follows identity. That's why real rebuilding is not just about changing routines, it's about changing the story you tell yourself about who you are. Every person carries an internal narrative. It's built from childhood experiences, past failures, criticism, success, comparison, and repeated thoughts. Over time, that narrative solidifies into identity. You start saying things like, "That's just how I am," without realizing that how you are is mostly a collection of reinforced beliefs. The mind is incredibly powerful in protecting what it believes to be true about you. If you label yourself as disorganized, your brain will filter situations in ways that confirm that belief. If you label yourself as resilient, your brain will search for evidence of strength. In both cases, the identity shapes perception and perception shapes action. Rebuilding yourself requires interrupting that automatic identity loop. You have to become aware of the labels you've accepted about yourself. Many of them were formed during moments of pain or failure. Maybe you tried something once and failed, and you decided you weren't capable. Maybe someone criticized you repeatedly, and you internalized it as truth. But isolated experiences are not permanent definitions. When you cling to them, you shrink your future to fit your past. Growth begins when you question those internal labels instead of obeying them. A powerful shift happens when you move from outcome-based identity to value-based identity. Instead of saying, "I failed, so I'm a failure," you recognize that failure is an event, not a definition. Instead of saying, "I'm not disciplined," you say, "I am becoming disciplined." That small language change signals possibility instead of limitation. The brain responds strongly to repeated self-talk. Thoughts repeated frequently become beliefs. Beliefs repeated long enough become identity. So when you consciously choose empowering language about yourself, you are not pretending, you are planting new psychological seeds. However, identity does not change through words alone. It changes through aligned action. When you consistently perform behaviors that match the identity you want, your brain updates its internal model. If you want to see yourself as focused, you practice focus daily. If you want to see yourself as confident, you take small, courageous actions regularly. Each action becomes evidence. Evidence builds belief. Belief strengthens identity. This is why even small, disciplined acts matter so much. They are not just tasks completed, they are proof that you are evolving. Another critical aspect of mindset is how you interpret difficulty. A fixed mindset views struggle as a sign of incapability. A growth-oriented mindset views struggle as part of development. When rebuilding yourself, you must expect discomfort. The brain resists change because it prefers familiarity, even when familiarity is limiting. If you interpret that resistance as proof that you can't change, you stop. But if you interpret it as a normal stage of growth, you persist. That interpretation alone can determine whether transformation continues or collapses. Self-identity also affects standards. People act in alignment with the standards they believe they deserve. If you subconsciously feel unworthy of success, you will sabotage progress. If you believe you deserve growth, you will protect your habits. This is why rebuilding requires raising internal standards. You begin to demand better from yourself, not out of self-criticism, but out of self-respect. When your identity shifts to someone who values discipline, clarity, and purpose, your decisions begin to reflect that automatically. Over time, a new mindset creates a feedback loop of strength. As your identity evolves, your actions improve. As your actions improve, your results improve. As your results improve, your confidence grows. And as your confidence grows, your identity solidifies at a higher level. This cycle is powerful because it builds upward momentum. What once felt impossible becomes normal. What once felt uncomfortable becomes routine. What once felt out of reach becomes expected. Ultimately, rebuilding yourself is less about becoming someone completely different and more about uncovering a stronger version that already exists within you. Your mindset determines whether that version remains hidden or emerges. When you intentionally shape your self-identity through disciplined thought and aligned action, you gain control over your direction. And once you understand that who you believe you are influences everything you do, you realize that changing your life begins with changing your internal definition of yourself. Growth always demands separation from what keeps you small. Many people want transformation, but they want to carry everything familiar with them into the new version of their life. They want new discipline without leaving old distractions. They want new confidence without leaving environments that constantly weaken it. They want higher standards while staying surrounded by habits and attitudes that reinforce mediocrity. That conflict is why change often stalls. You cannot fully step into a stronger identity while holding tightly to patterns, people, and spaces that belong to the version of you you're trying to outgrow. Environments shape behavior more than willpower does. The people around you influence what feels normal. The conversations you hear influence what you think about. The expectations in your circle influence what you attempt. If you remain in spaces where procrastination, negativity, or complacency are the norm, you absorb those patterns unconsciously. Humans adapt to their surroundings quickly. That's why someone can feel motivated alone, but lose focus the moment they return to a familiar environment that rewards comfort over growth. Rebuilding requires awareness of this influence. You must examine whether your surroundings support who you're becoming or reinforce who you used to be. Letting go of environments does not always mean physically leaving places or relationships immediately. It begins with psychological distancing. You stop participating in habits that contradict your goals. You reduce exposure to influences that drain your focus. You choose inputs that align with growth instead of distraction. Over time, this shift often leads to tangible changes in how you spend time and with whom. The process can feel uncomfortable because familiarity creates emotional attachment. Even when something limits you, it still feels safe simply because it's known. Growth requires stepping beyond that familiarity into uncertainty, and uncertainty naturally feels risky. But remaining in limiting environments carries a greater long-term cost: stagnation. Excuses are another attachment that must be released. Excuses are protective narratives that shield you from discomfort or accountability. They explain why change is delayed or avoided. I don't have time. I'm too tired. This is just how life is. These statements often contain fragments of truth, but they become harmful when they prevent agency. Excuses maintain the status quo because they remove responsibility. Rebuilding demands the opposite: ownership. When you drop excuses, you accept that your choices still matter within your circumstances. That realization restores power. Instead of waiting for conditions to improve, you act within the conditions you have. Comfort zones are perhaps the hardest to leave because they feel pleasant in the short term. Comfort means predictability, low risk, and minimal strain, but long-term growth rarely exists there. Skills expand under challenge. Confidence grows through exposure to difficulty. Identity strengthens through overcoming resistance. When you repeatedly choose comfort over challenge, you reinforce the identity of someone who avoids growth stress. Over time, that avoidance shrinks your perceived capability. Tasks begin to feel harder simply because they are unfamiliar. The comfort zone becomes smaller and more restrictive. Leaving it reverses that contraction. Each step into challenge enlarges your sense of possibility. An important truth is that separation is not rejection of people or past experiences. It is alignment with your direction. Not everyone is meant to walk every stage of your journey with you. Some relationships fit earlier phases of life, but not later ones. Holding on to them out of guilt or habit can create tension between who you are becoming and who you were. When you adjust boundaries or distance, it is not superiority, it is self-preservation of growth. Healthy connections adapt and support your evolution. Those that cannot may naturally fade. That transition can feel lonely, but loneliness during growth is often temporary. It creates space for connections that match your new standards. Releasing limiting patterns also builds internal clarity. When distractions decrease and excuses fade, you see your priorities more sharply. Energy once scattered across conflicting habits becomes focused. That focus accelerates progress because effort is no longer diluted. Instead of constantly resetting after setbacks caused by old patterns, you move steadily forward. Momentum emerges when your behaviors, environment, and goals align in the same direction. Without that alignment, progress feels like pushing against resistance. With alignment, progress feels natural and sustainable. There is also empowerment in recognizing that you are allowed to change your standards. Many people unconsciously follow expectations inherited from family, peers, or culture. They fear outgrowing those expectations because it may disrupt belonging. But belonging that requires shrinking yourself is costly. Rebuilding involves redefining what is acceptable for your time, energy, and attention. You begin to choose growth, supportive norms, even if they differ from those around you. That shift marks maturity, the transition from external definition to internal direction. Ultimately, letting go of environments, excuses, and comfort zones is not loss but transition. You are exchanging familiarity for possibility. The process may feel unstable at first because old reference points disappear before new ones fully form. But that in-between space is where transformation stabilizes. As you continue choosing aligned actions and surroundings, A new normal emerges, one that supports your evolving identity. And once that new normal is established, the very things that once required effort become natural expressions of who you have chosen to become. Consistency in small actions is one of the most underestimated forces in personal transformation. People often believe that big results require big moves, dramatic changes, massive effort, or sudden breakthroughs. But lasting change rarely works that way. It grows quietly, built through small behaviors repeated over time. The problem is that small actions feel insignificant in the moment. Waking up 30 minutes earlier, reading a few pages, exercising briefly, practicing a skill for a short period, none of these feel life-changing today. But when performed consistently, they begin to reshape identity, discipline, and direction in powerful ways. The mind naturally seeks immediate rewards. It wants visible progress, quick validation, and instant gratification. That's why people abandon small habits too early. They expect dramatic results within days, and when they don't see them, they assume nothing is happening. What they fail to recognize is that growth is often invisible in the beginning. Just like seeds underground, the early stages of development occur beneath the surface. Roots are forming before anything is visible above ground. If you stop watering the seed because you don't see growth immediately, you interrupt the process before it has a chance to emerge. Small actions matter because they compound. Compounding is not just financial, it applies to behavior, skill, and mindset. If you improve slightly every day, those improvements stack. A minor increase in discipline repeated daily strengthens self-control over time. A brief learning session repeated consistently builds knowledge that eventually creates expertise. Even small shifts in thinking, practiced repeatedly, can rewire long-held beliefs. The key is not intensity, it is repetition. Intensity burns out quickly. Repetition builds endurance. There is also a psychological advantage in starting small. Large goals can feel overwhelming, triggering avoidance. The brain resists tasks that seem too demanding or uncertain, but small actions reduce that resistance. They lower the barrier to entry. When the task feels manageable, you are more likely to begin, and beginning is powerful. Once you start, momentum often carries you further than expected. A short workout can turn into a longer one. A few minutes of focus can extend into a productive session. The hardest part is usually initiation, and small habits make initiation easier. Consistency builds credibility with yourself. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, you strengthen internal trust. That trust fuels confidence. Many people lack confidence not because they are incapable, but because they have repeatedly broken promises to themselves. By committing to small daily actions and honoring them, you repair that trust. Over time, you begin to see yourself as dependable. That perception changes how you approach challenges. Instead of doubting whether you will stick with something, you expect yourself to follow through because you have built a pattern of doing so. Another important aspect is that small actions create structure. Structure reduces chaos and emotional fluctuation. When certain behaviors become automatic parts of your day, you rely less on mood or circumstances. Whether you feel motivated or not, the action occurs. That reliability stabilizes progress. Life will always present unpredictable events, but consistent routines provide an anchor. They give you a sense of control even when other areas feel uncertain. That stability is essential for long-term rebuilding because it prevents emotional highs and lows from completely disrupting your direction. Small actions also reduce fear. Large changes often come with high perceived risk. The brain exaggerates potential failure when stakes feel high, but small steps feel safer. They allow gradual exposure to growth without overwhelming anxiety. As you accumulate small wins, fear decreases because you gain evidence of capability. That evidence builds resilience. You become less intimidated by bigger challenges because you have practiced consistent effort on smaller ones. Over time, what once required effort becomes natural. Habits automate behavior, conserving mental energy. Instead of debating whether to act, you act automatically. That automation frees attention for higher-level thinking and creativity. As discipline becomes routine, your capacity expands. You are no longer fighting yourself daily. You are progressing steadily. The beauty of consistent small actions is that they democratize success. You do not need extraordinary talent to improve daily. You need commitment to repetition. Anyone can take a small step forward today, and when that step is repeated tomorrow and the next day, it transforms into progress. Over months and years, that steady progress separates those who dream from those who built. Small actions, practiced consistently, turn intention into reality and gradually reshape the trajectory of your entire life. Your past mistakes can become the foundation for future strength when you choose to interpret them as lessons instead of limitations. Many people carry their past like a weight, constantly replaying failures, regrets, and missed opportunities. They see their history as evidence of incapability or poor judgment, and that perception quietly shapes their present behavior. When you believe your past defines you, you hesitate to try again. You expect the same outcomes. You anticipate failure before action. In this way, the past stops being a memory and becomes a boundary. Rebuilding yourself requires breaking that boundary by transforming how you relate to what has already happened. Mistakes are inevitable in any meaningful growth process. Trying new directions, making decisions with incomplete knowledge, trusting the wrong people, choosing poorly under pressure, these experiences are part of being human. Yet many people interpret mistakes as permanent flaws rather than temporary missteps. They shift from "I made a mistake" to "I am a mistake." That identity fusion is damaging because it attaches shame to experience. Shame discourages action. It keeps you trapped in analysis, regret, or avoidance. But when you separate your identity from your actions, something changes. A mistake becomes information instead of condemnation. Information is powerful because it guides adjustment. Every failure contains data about what did not work, what you misunderstood, or what you need to develop. When you examine mistakes objectively, they become teachers. They reveal blind spots, weaknesses, or patterns that require change. Without mistakes, you would lack feedback. Progress would stall because you would not know what to refine. In this sense, the past is not an obstacle, but a resource. It contains the raw material for wisdom. The difference between someone stuck and someone rebuilding is not the number of mistakes, it is the interpretation of them. There is also resilience built through recovery. When you fall and rise again, you strengthen psychological endurance. You learn that setbacks are survivable. That knowledge reduces fear of future risk. People who have never failed often fear failure intensely because it is unknown. Those who have failed and recovered carry a different mindset. They understand that difficulty passes, that adaptation is possible, and that identity is not destroyed by error. This resilience becomes a structural support in future challenges. The past, once painful, becomes proof of durability. Another transformation occurs when regret is reframed as direction. Many regrets highlight values you neglected or goals you postponed. They point toward what matters. For example, regret about wasted time signals the importance of purposeful action. Regret about unhealthy choices signals the desire for well-being. Regret about missed opportunities signals ambition. When you read regret this way, it stops being a source of self-attack and becomes a compass. It shows you where to invest effort now. The same memory that once caused guilt can motivate change when interpreted constructively. Your past also provides empathy and depth. Experiences of difficulty expand understanding of others and of yourself. They add nuance to your perspective. Strength is not only about achievement, it is also about awareness gained through hardship. People who rebuild often carry insight that those with easier paths lack. That insight shapes wiser decisions and more grounded confidence. It reminds you that success is not perfection but adaptation over time. In this way, the past contributes not only to personal strength, but to emotional maturity. Letting mistakes become foundation rather than burden also requires forgiveness. Holding on to self-blame keeps you anchored in old identity. Forgiveness does not mean denying responsibility. It means releasing perpetual punishment. You acknowledge the error, extract the lesson, and allow movement forward. Without this release, rebuilding stalls because attention remains fixed on what cannot be changed. Growth always occurs in the present, informed by the past, but not imprisoned by it. Over time, when you integrate lessons from mistakes, patterns change. Decisions improve because they incorporate prior understanding. Awareness increases because you recognize early signs of unproductive paths. Confidence grows because you know you can adapt. The same experiences that once weakened you become supports beneath you. They elevate judgment, resilience, and clarity. Your foundation becomes stronger precisely because it includes reinforced areas where cracks once existed. Ultimately, the past does not lose power by being erased. It loses power by being transformed. When you reinterpret mistakes as formative rather than defining, you reclaim agency. You become someone shaped by experience rather than limited by it. Each error contributes to structure instead of damage. And as those contributions accumulate, you stand on a foundation built not from perfection, but from learned strength, stable, realistic, and capable of supporting the future you are actively creating.